Good morning. There's 10 minutes left in the morning, and we're here standing between you and lunch. So we're going to try to bring it for you. This is the panel presentation on the cancer inpatient design experience. So if this is not the flight you thought you were on, we hope you'll stay. Anyway, I just want to quickly introduce the team here who's going to be joining us, and we're going to try to move through this quickly enough to give time for a lot of questions. So maybe if you'd start introducing yourself, Melody.
Hi, my name is Melody Lau. I work with the Performance Excellence Department within Stanford Hospital.
Javier, Cuevas, same department, same role. Truly enjoyed design thinking and excited about sharing some of our learnings with you.
My name is Laura Zatella. I've been here at Stanford for 15 years, taking care of hematology and oncology patients and bone marrow transplant patients. I'm a nurse practitioner.
I think I've got a different device.
Your mic.
So I'm going to be a challenging name for the day. I'm Sridhar Sheshadri. I go by Shri. I'm the Vice President for Cancer Services at Stanford.
And I'm Helen Waters. I'm the Administrative Director here at Stanford Healthcare for Operational Planning and Design. We're bringing together 3P facility design and planning with design thinking and trying to design space for our patients and their families in a way that is truly human-centered, which means that it includes the needs of patients' families as well as the people who care for them. So we're here to share with you today our journey. This is kind of our very professional way of outing ourselves. You've heard a lot today and yesterday from the point of view of patients who've been imploring organizations like ours to listen to them. And we've heard a lot from providers who are talking about data and technologists who are talking about apps. And we're here to talk to you about our very earnest journey about what we discovered as being an earnest provider trying to be better, and what that was like and what we learned along the way and how that influences what we're going to try to design in the future. So I'm just going to quickly walk you through this. How many people are from California here? Okay. Did anybody notice anything as they came up to the hospital? There's these cranes out there. Did you see those? Yeah, so there's two really big cranes out front. It's because both the Children's Hospital and the Adult Hospital are doubling in size. And one of the things we're going to do when we open the Adult Hospital around January of 2018 is we're going to start renovating our existing hospital. And a huge portion of the existing hospital is actually going to become a cancer hospital within the Adult Hospital. And our team is challenged with designing what that cancer hospital will be. And we were trying to figure that out. And so around Halloween of last year, Javier came up to me and said, hey, why don't we ask the design school if they can help us figure out what to design? And I said, that sounds like a really great idea, thinking that it was actually going to be this entire architectural event and that we were going to jump forward in our timeline about a year and save ourselves a huge budget. So we submitted a proposal to the D School. And if you're familiar with the D School at Stanford, they are not a separate institution. They're simply an intersection of many programs where they teach people design thinking across multiple disciplines. And you have a chance to compete as an organization once a year to be their guinea pig, where they teach you to design think. And so we were lucky enough to be selected out of many companies. And so they sent over 2 people to whip us into shape, and this is what we did. So we learned about the design thinking cycle, which some people here may know about. It starts with empathizing with the people, typically the customer, defining what the problem really is instead of what it seems to be, and then trying to think really broadly about what how to solve it. In this case, it was about how to delight the patient. And then we were challenged to prototype those solutions really quickly, typically with pieces of paper, sometimes with props like hats, and to actually role play with customers right there in the moment, which is typically a very intimidating and sometimes humiliating experience for hospital administrators. And we were forced to do it by our design coaches. And we had a lot of excuses, I would say, about why we couldn't do it right away, and we need to have some meetings, and we needed to draw some things, and we needed to make some Visio charts, and they took all of that away from us and said, no, why don't you just walk over to the unit and do it now? So we would then test the result of our very bright ideas, and we found, much to our chagrin, that a number of our ideas were total faceplants, and a couple of the ideas that we thought were really stupid were the things that our patients loved. So that was our learning, see, because we were trying to be a learning organization, and so we're here actually exposing our low scores because we think this is the only way to design properly. And then you do it over and over and over again. And the whole point of this is to try to do it as early in the process as possible with the least amount of cost so that you can actually figure out what's meaningful to the people who need it to be meaningful, so that when you actually have to lay steel in the ground and pour concrete, it will be worth something. Okay, so we used a technique called empathy mapping, and we interviewed a lot of folks. And so I'm just going to walk you really quickly through this example that's now, I think, become infamous throughout the hospital. It's called "The Mattress is Uncomfortable." And this kind of illustrates who we are as Stanford, but I don't think it singles out Stanford as an academic medical center. I think it very much puts a spotlight on all well-meaning healthcare organizations who are trying desperately to take really good care of people. So this is a composite picture of a patient, Mr. G, awaiting a bone marrow transplant. And this is a very typical comment that we get on our Press-Gini results. You know, we get complaints about the sheets, we get complaints about the food's cold, it's inedible, who made that sauce anyway? And then we get things like this mattress sucks, it's uncomfortable. And so what we do, because we're Stanford, we don't buy mattresses. We buy computer systems. We buy low pressure, alternating pressure mattress and pump systems that cost about $2,000 each. They have a microprocessor controlled digital pump that inflates and deflates at specific times to prevent bed sores. It has advanced sensor technology. You need actually special clinical engineers to take care of these mattresses, by the way. And it reacts to patient movement. So it moves at individual rates depending on who you are, how much you weigh, and how much you move. By the way, we also got feedback that this prevents any patient of ours from getting a good night's sleep. But it is airflow auto-adjusted to optimize performance to make sure you don't get a bed sore, because we will get dinged if you get a bed sore while you are under our care. But you will never get a good night's sleep. And the mattress is uncomfortable. And even during a power outage, which do occur here in the state of California, it will remain inflated. And thereby you will never get a good night's sleep, not even when the power's out. Okay, so as you can imagine, we care a lot about this. We go to the trouble of buying $2,000 mattresses with computer chips in them. We have expensive engineers to take care of them. We'll throw money at it because we think this is the right thing to do for you. And in some sense it is. And in some sense it's not. You know, so what did we do when we found out mattress is uncomfortable? We thought, okay, well, we'll just get a better mattress. We'll get the next version of the mattress, right? Different density, different thickness. We'll get a different bed. Maybe it's the bed. Maybe it just didn't rotate up in the right direction because there are different beds we'll call Hill-Rom. We'll get the latest in here. And then we'll put it through what we've been trained to do in performance excellence, which is to standardize it, to make it consistent, to make it a system so that things don't fall through the cracks. And again, at many levels, this is very valid work to do. And what we learned is that it's really not really enough. So when we went and talked to Mr. G, because we typically don't ask patients directly what they think because it's too scary. We didn't actually talk to him about his mattress. We just said, where are you from? You know, I'm from Ann Arbor. Where are you from? Do you have any cats? And he said, you know what? My body really aches. And I've been here for 120 days in my room. I'm discouraged from leaving my room because I'm a bone marrow transplant patient, and everybody is terrified because I have one T cell to my name that that I'll die of an infection here. I certainly don't want to die of an infection here, so I stay in my room. And when I lie in this bed all day, my body aches. And then you start thinking, well, hey, maybe if I lay in my bed all day for 120 days, my body would ache too, especially with this mattress. But more than that, I'm really, really lonely. My family members can't stay with me overnight because we're worried about infection. And, there's a big antechamber in here. It's very much an environment where it looks like you shouldn't come in. And if I need to go out, I have to wear a HEPA mask. So I'm really, really lonely. By the way, my body aches. And naturally, I'm on day 121 now of my treatment, and I'm terrified. And by the way, my body aches, I'm lonely, and this mattress is extremely uncomfortable. And most of all, I'm really tired of being in this room. 120 days in a room. It's really like a prison sentence. I don't know where to go, and I don't have anybody to walk with because they're all busy. My nurse is busy. He or she can't leave the unit with me to just go for a walk. I don't want to put on the HEPA mask. It hurts. I don't want everybody looking at me like I'm some sort of alien from outer space with this on. I can barely walk very far. I don't have any energy. I don't know when I'm going to be able to get up and go. And when I am, and by the time I can, I don't have the energy to muster to coordinate that effort. And by the way, this mattress is extremely uncomfortable. So Mr. G really just misses being able to walk around where and when he wants, doing what he wants, the way he did before he became a, quote, cancer patient, unquote. Mr. G just misses being Mr. G. So that's what we learned, but all we ask, typically in a broad, systematic manner as an organization, is the questions on the Press-Ganey survey, which not every patient completes. And the way we ask those questions invites answers such as, the food was cold and the mattress is uncomfortable. Because most people are not going to write down all that stuff on a survey that they get that's clearly on some sort of computer-generated form from Press-Ganey. But we realize we are obligated to ask those questions because those are frankly as important, if not more important, than the fact that the mattress is extremely uncomfortable. And so that was what we learned. And then I'm going to turn this over to the panel about how we learned it, what we learned about ourselves, and what we learned was really important. These are just some pictures. Up here is this F grant? No, it's E1, I think. This is our BMT unit. We videotaped them. They were extremely excited to be videotaped. We'll tell you what happened to the videotape and how successful that was. These are hardworking nurses who are getting ready to welcome patients into the unit. We'll tell you what that was about, how that worked. Here we actually are trying to figure out what to test. This is a patient. We don't have many patient photos, as you can imagine, because of privacy concerns. But this is a patient critiquing our test prototypes. And then here we are giving a report out to patients that we had interviewed and tested so that they could give us an additional round of feedback. This is a wall that we created called Random Acts of Kindness. This was one of our prototypes that we tested, where we invited people to fill out a very simple form where they just drew little pictures or wrote words about who they are, what they're grateful for, and what they want to share with others. And then we took them and taped them up on the wall in the middle of our atrium in the hospital. And we found that people would go and stand by them and read them and fill out more forms and frequently cry. And then they would thank Melody, who thought it up, for having the thoughtfulness to give them a venue to engage with others. And here we are getting critiqued by the people who cared the most, patients and their families. So I'm just going to leave this up for a second, but this actually kind of encapsulates a lot of what changed in us and what we did, and we'll kind of disaggregate that process for you. But this was a sign that our coaches put up for us. When we started this process, we met in conference rooms in the hospital, which is what all normal people do when they're planning. It turns out we have no available conference rooms in the hospital, so we ended up working in a room, like an anesthesia workroom, literally in the bowels of the hospital. And our coaches actually came to us about the second or third session and said, "Do you guys always work like tucked away, hidden where nobody can see you?" And we said, "Well, yes, we do, because all the other available space is taken up by clinical care." And they said, "Well, can't we work someplace where there's other people around?" And we kind of looked at each other like, "Why would we do that?" And they said, "Well, can't we work out in that atrium?" And we said, "No, we can't. That's like too exposed. We can't possibly do that." So they said, "Pack your stuff. We're going to the atrium." And so this was a theme. Every time we didn't want to do something, they would make us do it. So we packed up our stuff and we went in the atrium and we stood like this, and we were so uncomfortable and we didn't want to make eye contact with anyone. And they hung up this giant sign that basically said, "Hey, if you're a patient or family member or just a random stranger, come over here and check us out, see what we're doing. And if you have any criticism, bring it. Oh, and if you want to join us, that would be even better." And we were totally freaked out by it. And it turned out to be the thing that changed everything. So with that, I'm going to invite everybody to reacquaint. So again, we have Melody, Javier, Laura. So they were on the design team with me. We also have two people who aren't here today who need to be recognized. We have Carlos Villalva. He is our colleague. He's enjoying the weekend with his family in Oakland, but he's our colleague at the hospital. He is the director of capital projects related to the renovation of the existing hospital. He works in planning, design, and construction. He's a licensed architect, and he has a master's degree in urban planning. So if you want to, I'm winding this up for you, Shri, because these are like the group of incredibly overeducated people that we got to work with. As well as Jonathan Barrick. Dr. Barrick is our chair of OBGYN. He has a large number of patients who are oncology patients, and he was very much a heartbeat of what we were doing, encouraging us to be thoughtful, considerate people, even as we were trying to be very responsible designers and planners. And then we have Shri, of course, who actually was the person who took the first leap of faith with us when we came to him with this proposal about being trained by the design school in this method. And he reached into his pocket and paid for the entire thing, having no idea what we were actually doing or how we were going to get there. And we owe him an eternal debt of thanks for just believing in this process before there was any evidence that it would turn into anything decent. So I'm just going to ask a first question. If people would just comment, and maybe we can just go down the line. But what was this process like relative to your expectations, this design process?
I think I've changed my mechanism. I'm going to use the microphone. So good morning, or now it's good afternoon, I think. I'll be brief about this. And as Helen said, that Halloween afternoon, I think it was around Halloween time, Friday afternoon, I get this email from Javier saying, "We want to have a design school project. Can we do it?" And as Helen said, I had no clue what we were getting into. So I said, "Sure, why not? Sounds good." So I think it was a wonderful journey. But let me just touch on two aspects, and then I'm going to pass it on to Laura to make her comments. Are there any sociologists in the room? Nobody? Okay, we'll make up what a sociologist might have said. So there is theory testing and there's theory building. And people that want to get things done, namely administration in the hospital, want to just test a theory, which is usually a plan of a hospital. We get comfortable because we would run out and buy that bed that she talked about. That's basically testing somebody else's theory. The big learning for me was this was theory building. This was ground up theory building, building something new, hearing our patients and our families talk about that. So that was one big gestalt finding over this year journey. The second one is, if you really believe in this, you have to lose your sense of arrogance that you actually know the answer. And that came through loud and clear, starting with me and many of my colleagues here. Like Helen said, we thought patients wanted something. They actually thought this was a dumb idea. So you have to lose that sense of arrogance, become humble, and really believe in what they're saying. So those are two takeaways. And then Laura.
So how many people in the room are providers? nurses, nurse practitioners, doctors, other providers. So I'll tell you from the provider point of view, this was a very eye-opening experience for me. As you can imagine, when you are patient-facing, patients are counting on you for the right answer, and before we're trained in evidence. And everything that we do, any recommendations that we make for a patient have been tested and proven, and there's literature and there's research. And so we always use a very conservative approach when we're patient-facing. So for me, the design experience was really, it turned my way of thinking upside down because I felt like it gave me the freedom to test ideas and to fail. Like it was a safe environment where you could come up with ideas and it was okay if that idea wasn't right because you had an opportunity then to improve on it and keep testing until you came up with the best idea. And I think that introducing this into an organization where you have all of the things that are implemented with patients are evidence-based, but you have a design thinking department or a design thinking team that is an area where you can actually test things and improve on them is really important. So that is what I took out of it as a provider.
So I had a little bit of design thinking experience prior to coming to Stanford and bringing this topic up. So I knew that there was something more that we as an organization could do to try and connect with the patient and try and get a little bit more understanding of what might be some unmet needs. What that experience was like for me was, I want to say it's selfish because I would go out, I would talk to patients. Some patients were just bedridden. You could tell that they were just not having a great day. But because you were sitting there saying, hey, I want to understand what are some of your unmet needs because I want to make it better, you would then turn around and feel the ownership to go back and do something about it. Not just sit there and pretend, not make up something and then turn around and say, look, it looks pretty and here you go and, good luck implementing it. No, you would sit there and actually try and solve. And as Helen said, we had a lot of face plants, but we would have to pick ourselves right back up and try it again. And I think the experience for me was just beyond, it built me further than I thought it would.
So I work more on the administrative side of things, Javier and I do. And our normal scope of work is someone gives us an initiative and we create a plan for it. And you plan and you plan and you go through the meetings and kind of make sure that everyone's aligned. But the thing that you're missing is in that alignment is actually getting your customer's perspective. And one of the things that I learned and took away from this was don't be afraid of going onto the units. And this is just coming from someone who's not involved in clinical care. And that's what has made me a better, implementer. It's to not be afraid of really just going into the patient room. And who am I to bother you when you're going through an emotional and physical journey? But don't be afraid to ask them because really they are more than happy to provide you with insights and do have plenty of criticisms for the things that you want to implement. So.
Thank you. I'll frame a little bit about the testing that we did, and we'll talk a little bit about things that we attempted and how we attempted them and what worked and what didn't. This entire project took place over less than 2 months. It was 7 weeks. We spent probably meeting with our design coaches and working together on a dedicated basis about 2 days a week. This is on top of our normal jobs, so we just kind of fit it in. We met with each other and ideated, prototyped, tested probably 4 days a week, mornings, evenings, weekends. And typically our coaches gave us less than 48 hours to ideate, prototype, test, and bring back results. So it was under extreme constraints, which forced us to be creative, and it forced us to, as Sri said, to abandon our arrogance and to suit up and to show the courage that it took us to step way out of our comfort zones, because it was obvious that the people we were trying to solve for, cancer patients and their families, who are really just people, right? They're people, are honored customers that are defined much more broadly than the term cancer patient could ever hope to define. that if they were going to have to go on this journey, then we needed to go there with them. So let's talk a little bit about some of the prototypes. Maybe, Melody, you could start with a couple of the ideas that we had that we thought were really bright, and then you could share with us quickly what happened out of them, and then we'll move on to things that were face plants, because those are the most entertaining.
So I'm going to combine two, one of a bright and also a faceplant. So through our empathy interviews, we had the assumption that patients want to feel welcomed when they enter the hospital. It's a normal assumption. You would assume that that's kind of a normal feeling that people who come into our hospital wants to receive. So our team was like, oh my God, a prototype. We're going to create a video with all the people that the patient would actually interact with in their hospital stay, from parking to the registration staff to transport, housekeeping, and to their providers, the nurses and the nurse managers. So that video on the top left, that was why the nurses were so excited. They're like, oh my God, we're going to be in a video. And we got them together, and we actually did this within a span of 24 hours. So it's going back to the idea of low res. Our facilitators were like, you don't have any budget, you're just going to go do it.
We use this to video.
Yeah, our iPhones.
Everybody used an iPhone, and we were like,
so
wobbly.
we wrote them scripts. We were like, please introduce yourself, tell the patient that you're happy to take care of them. And the bright light was that all the stakeholders were very excited and very enthusiastic about, this is great. This is a great way to enhance the patient experience. And the challenge that we found was that we realized that not all patients have smartphones. How are we going to send them this video? That's a lengthy process. And two, when we figured it out, we kind of just sent it out and prayed. And then basically we did get some feedback from patients. And when we finally went on the unit, the patient was actually taking her walk around the unit, and we stopped her, and I was like, did you get the video that we had texted, emailed you, and called you about, just to make sure that you got it? She's like, yeah, oh yeah, everyone welcomed me. And then I was like, oh, how did you feel about it? And she's like, well, I really would have wished you just sent me a video of my room. Like, it's really all I wanted. Like, it's nice, but just a video of my room would have been perfect. So I was like, oh no, we didn't address the patient's needs. But the good thing is that, one, we didn't create a budget. It didn't take a long time. We didn't hire a professional videographer to come in, and we didn't implement something that didn't meet someone's needs. So a simple story like that, simple prototype like that, told us that there definitely needs to be more investigation in something as shiny and bright as a welcome video that you think would be effective, something different.
Javier, do you want to?
So just one quick story. It kind of piggybacks on that. One person that we had a chance to interview was a brother of a patient, and the patient was gravely ill. It was known that he was not going to be around for much longer, and he happened to be a beekeeper. And I don't know why, just that job just stood out. Like I don't think I've ever met a beekeeper, but he was sharing with me that his wife had to take some time off and be with the bees. And so it made me start thinking about, wow, the family, the outer circle, starting to be impacted by this one patient that's in our hospital care. He went on to say that him and his sister and a couple other brothers were taking shifts being with the patient, with his brother, and they're sleeping in their car in the parking lot. And he said, it's really tough. It's really tough at doing this. It's really rough. But you know what? My sister's better at roughing it than I am. And we got a little bit of a chuckle out of it for a second, but then I kept thinking, wow, we've made it so you have to be tough to be a family member. And that kind of brought up another need, which is there's an unmet need about supporting the family members, not just the patient, but also supporting the family members. And what can we do about that? So that was a pivotal moment for me to start to see that there's an outer layer of opportunities that we have to be able to make the care experience better for our patients and our family members.
Yeah. So I think one of the other things that we learned is we're creating standard work. What patients really want is individualized care. And like Melody described with our video, it was a general video of all the nurses and of the unit. And what the patient really wanted was the particular room that they were going to be in, the nurse that was taking care of them, like, wanted something individual. And as you know, when you're newly diagnosed, you are overwhelmed with a whole bunch of new information, and it's really hard to filter through information. And so what they want is for us to show them the way, show me what is going to matter for my care. So we thought that it would be helpful to welcome patients by calling them ahead of time before they come into the hospital so that we could address any concerns or fears or questions that they had before they came into the hospital. And this was a prototype that actually was really successful, and we learned a lot of things from it. We called a patient, and I called the patient. I introduced myself, and she said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm right in the middle of Costco." I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Can I call you back later?" "Oh, no, I really want to talk to you." And I was like, "All right, well, if it's okay with you." And so I explained that she was going to be admitted to the hospital and the specific procedure for her, where she should check in, what needed to be done. And it turned out she had very important questions about her medications that needed to be addressed. She was concerned because she was from out of town and she didn't know her husband was going to stay while she was in the hospital. And she had questions about her overall diagnosis. So even before she arrived in the hospital, after that call, I was able to call her attending physician and alert them about the concerns that the patients had to make sure that they were addressed in the clinic visit that they were going to have the next day. I was able to contact the social worker and arrange for a hotel room for the patient's husband. And so all of this happened before the patient came into the hospital. And so at least the concerns and the fears that we could address were addressed. Some of the other things that we learned from that is that it appeared to be very important who was making the phone call. Because if you didn't have a little bit of clinical background or you didn't know what resources were available, then the same thing that happened with the video would have happened with the phone call. Like, "Oh, it's really nice that you called to remind me that I was coming into the hospital, but you weren't able to answer any of my questions." So we're able to use that information to design a process where we have a specially trained person with clinical knowledge to do those phone calls.
Shri, I wonder if you would comment then on, since this turned out to be a very successful prototype, kind of unlooked for from us, can you tell us what's happened now and what's going on now today with cancer treatment sort of in dovetailing with those findings?
So just a little bit about the cancer service line here, and then two other learnings from these stories. Somewhat generated by this effort, but also separately from a group of donors, we have embarked on what we call the Cancer Patient Transformation Journey, which is a pretty significant gift we got from a group of anonymous donors, which is really focused on the patient-centric model of care. And I was at your talk this morning. I really enjoyed it, the first talk. Is it, I'm sorry, I forgot the name, Kathleen? Judy, sorry. I was really enamored. I'll catch up with you after this. Many thoughts. But the whole notion here is how do you put not only the patient but also the family at the center of this ecosystem, which we actually have not done well in academic medicine, and especially in cancer care. It's a complex diagnosis. It's a complex journey. So these kinds of stories, these kinds of methods, these kinds of models have really helped us define what this care coordination is. And the analogy that I use is Edmund Hillary would probably have not climbed Mount Everest if he didn't have Tenzing Norgay by his side. I think you know who these people are. And if you think of climbing Mount Everest as the analogy for healing or treating cancer, you really need a Sherpa to actually guide you through this process. It doesn't have to be a physical Sherpa. It could be a combination of a physical and a virtual Sherpa. We don't really offer that in the healthcare system today. So that's sort of the big Gestalt learning. In terms of these stories that came through, the thing that we had to get comfortable with is scrappy design. That's a design thinking term. Most places, especially Stanford, we like perfection. We like things that are neat PowerPoints, color pictures, neatly tied in a bow. And stories like this are not that way. They're scrappy. They're small tidbits that you have to integrate. And we, as people that lead the service line, have to get comfortable with that. And the last thought on this, and then I'll pass it back to Helen, is these stories are very powerful. They're very important. It's a lot about stories. But the question that's often in our minds is, there's a term called MISI, which is mutually exclusive and completely exhaustive. So when you see a plan for a cancer hospital, the traditional 25,000 sheets, every line is there, there's a left wall, a right wall, here's the bed. It's mutually exclusive. Everything is drawn, and it's completely exhaustive. The question that goes through my mind is, this is great, this is wonderful, but have we touched every part that we need to touch? And the rationalization I've come to and my colleagues have come to is we probably never will. So this is the need for building a learning system. We have to constantly evolve. We will never actually be able to define perfectly on day one. So we have to build in enough slack in the system to be able to adapt to different patient family needs. Does that give you a sense?
Thank you. We also came upon a few things that worked really well and were a total surprise. I wanted to just give a mention to something that we called getting to know me. So in the course of interviewing patients and family members in this way and really inhabiting their life with them, we, of course, learned that people wanted to be treated, surprise, surprise, like people, and and they really wanted us to interact with them based on who they are individually, not just the person in room 39B. And so our first instinct, of course, being who we are, was to have some sort of flat, huge, high pixelated monitor in the rooms, and it could stream Netflix, and it could, you could download things from the internet, and it would talk to Epic, and then we kind of dumbed it down to, we realized, okay, well, we can't do that because A, we have no budget, and B, then we need to pull a permit from Oshpod to hang anything that weighs more than 25 pounds on the wall, so we can't do that. And so we said, well, how about a whiteboard? So we went to Staples and bought a bunch of whiteboards, and then we got a lot of pushback about, taping things to the wall. So then Laura said, how about a piece of paper? And we were like, oh my God, you're right. So she got a bunch of pieces of paper. You guys all know this high technology, right? 8.5 by 11 copy paper. And she wrote on it, getting to know me. And
Well, actually, the first version of it was getting to know you. Right? Again, from my perspective, I'm getting to know you. And then, so it's basically Microsoft Word, right? I just added a little design, and I said, getting to know you. And we wrote down different things, like, I like to be called, my interests are, I live with, and we gave it to patients, and it was really fun. Patients really liked it because the nurse would go in, or the nurse practitioner, or one of us, and we would help them fill it out. It would stimulate discussion. And then we put it in a little plastic sheet protector, and we pinned it to the top of their bed. And anyone who came in the room would say, oh, look at that. Oh, wow, you like to watch that TV show? I like to watch that too. And it made them feel really good. Their doctors looked at it. Housekeeping looked at it. And so when we went to get feedback, they said, well, wait a second. Why do you say getting to know you? Where I'm not getting to know you, you're getting to know me. And so that's when we changed it to the getting to know me.
Right. And we learned a lot of important things that didn't occur to us because we're not inpatients, and so we needed to look at the world through those eyes. Sometimes people would put those pieces of paper at the foot of the bed, which is where the patient can see it, but the patient already knows themselves. So it turned out to be an incredibly stupid place to put the piece of paper. And so we learned that you should put it near the patient so that when you are looking at this person, you see information near them and you don't have to look away because it's really awkward to talk to somebody when you're looking away from them. And that, as we found, all kinds of people would engage. We talked to residents, we talked to physicians, we talked to nurses, we talked to housekeepers, and they said, I never would have thought to ask, or I'm usually too busy, but it was right there, it was a prompt, and it was just so easy to engage, and that conversation made so much of a difference to us. And the patients love it because then it's an easy introduction. It's like your glow sticks, but even easier than that.
I'd like to add one quick thing to, it's actually not going to be too quick, but just give me a quick second on that.
Yeah.
So some of the prototypes that we saw resonate with our patients and with the staff, from my takeaway, we're falling into, I just kept on taking a step back and seeing what's working, why is it working, and some of those things, like in that example, it fell into the category of, hey, care about me, not just for me, but care about me. And when you're posting that type of information and folks are asking you as a patient about you, that's showing that you actually care about them. And why is that important? Well, you want somebody that cares about you, that's caring for you, right? Because then they're going to be on your side and making sure that they're advocating for your well-being. Another one of the prototypes that was mentioned, which was, hey, I just wish I knew what the room looked like. That's a sense of control, another unmet need that I think we have opportunities to address. Another one that we discovered or along the way I was looking at is just a sense of trust. So patients come in, some patients just hand over their trust. They come into an unfamiliar environment. It's like stepping on board an aircraft carrier. You have no idea what to expect. You see people running around wearing different clothes, different colors, saying different words like bulkhead and Skittles and what have you not. And so they come in and they hand over their trust. And what's the onus is for us not to erode that trust. So there's a part of gaining trust, but sometimes patients come in and guess what? You're operating on them, you're caring for them. That means that they trust that you're going to be able to do that. So then it's our job to not erode that trust. That means don't grab the handle on your way out and ask the patient, hey, do you want something else? Because, are you being sincere about that? So those are the type of things that we need to make sure that we keep an eye on. And one thing that we also heard, which I was smiling when I heard it, was the new normal. The new normal, patients are having to deal with converting to a new normal. Sometimes they're able to return to their normal life. Sometimes they need need assistance converting to their new normal life. And so those are the areas I believe that we have opportunities to address.
We have about 10 minutes, so we want to open up the floor to questions.
I'm a physician here, and about 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to be a family member of a patient in the ICU, and I spent almost 3 weeks straight in the hospital with my son. And what I wanted to say about, from a family member standpoint, is that the waiting rooms could be made more comfortable for family who are basically living there. And I met a lot of other people who were family members of transplant patients, cardiac patients, and we knew all the waiting rooms, and we knew which waiting room could be where the lights could be turned off, because it's 24 hours of that constant bright light. It'd be nice to have dimmers in the waiting rooms for the nighttime. And also, I slept with 2 chairs pushed together at night because I would check on my son every 2 hours, so maybe some recliners would be excellent, but something like that makes all the difference for those of us who don't want to leave because your kid may not make it the next hour, kind of thing.
Thank you. I'm just going to quickly touch on that. And then if anybody else has a question, please raise your hand. We heard this over and over. We witnessed it ourselves. We actually went and interviewed people who sleep in our atrium every night because they cannot bear to be parted from their loved ones any sooner than Mother Nature would have that occur. And we were so humbled by this so obvious need. It's not new that people don't want to be separated from their loved ones, and it's not new that there's no space in the ICU room or the room in any of the other inpatient units typically, that we ended up just ordering food and walking around with a food cart and serving them food and apologizing. It's clear to us that in our design of the cancer hospital, as we go forward, we need to find a way to accommodate the reality and support it, not just tolerate it. That we have patients here who are fortunate enough to be staying with us for 3 days. And we have people here who are, I guess from our point of view clinically, we may feel that it's fortunate, but for the patient, for that person, it's really unfortunate that they can be here for 8 months. And so then they're not really, we say that they're here staying, but they're not here staying, they're living here, and we're really visiting them. This is really more their home than it is a place that we work. We're more impinging on them at that point. And we understand that we need to find a way to address that reality in a way that is consistent and dignified and doesn't gloss over something that's so obvious and so important. And we have never, I think, as an organization, seen things like food and lodging, as our responsibility, but they obviously are when that is what's demanded in the course of care, unless we were to change the course of care, of course. Thanks.
I know Dana-Farber's invited basically patients into every committee. How have you been able to expand upon that in the long-term planning?
Yeah, we're quite aware of the Dana-Farber, and Ed Bentz, who actually runs the Farber, is on our external scientific advisory board. We're not quite at the level of the Farber yet, so let's start there. But we've created multiple we used to call them patient councils. Now they're called patient family councils, much because of the comment that just we heard here about involving patients and their families. And just in the cancer service line, we have a group of about probably 10, 12 dedicated people that meet with us twice a month and give us their feedback, but that's not enough. So we've taken two of those people. One is a former patient who is now a survivor, and the other one's a family member. And Bev Anderson and Chris Bowers are fully integrated into the operations of the service line. So every Wednesday for the ops review, they're sitting there. Every review of every design, they're sitting with us. And I think we need to integrate at that level to make this work. It's not enough to just meet with them from 5 to 7 once a month or twice a month. These two people are ingrained in. So that's the first circle. The second circle is the Patient Advisory Council. Now they've built a third circle around that, where you can actually do something called crowdsourcing, which many of you have heard about, where if you're testing an idea like this, rather than testing it with 1 or 2 patients in the room, can you actually get opinions from larger communities? So that's also underway. And the fourth one is the Press Ganey patient survey comments. So those are the different levels. I hope that answered your question.
So the clinical future of oncology is around personalized medicine. So when it comes to prepping the design and the build out for the cancer center, it's really about the personalized care that they're going to experience. So how are you prepping yourselves for that individuality and the variability in the design?
So I'll take that question, and then we can invite others to answer also. The Cancer Hospital team is going to be assembled of all the people whose responsibilities are caring for people in those units. Also for the people sometimes in the clinics who send folks to be admitted to our units, and then people who are responsible for safely helping transition people out of those units. It will also include, in a way that's respectful and also clinically safe, patients and family members. So this thinking and training will be deployed across a team of people to very thoughtfully go through, hypothesize, test, prototype, test, assess the results of the hypothesis, and just do that systematically in a planning environment so that we can design a better inpatient room, so that we can design better flow in an inpatient unit, so that we can design better support space in a unit. So,
as a Stanford primary care physician, and I'm wondering, because the hospital is an intimidating place for primary care physicians. We don't have attending privileges. Many primary care physicians of cancer, people with cancer getting cared for, are outside of the community. Have you considered engaging us in the design and including us, because we're part of the caring bridge of the patients?
Yes, and that's a good term because it is a caring bridge. I'm happy to comment, but we are going to look as far up the food chain as possible, because we realize that once a patient arrives or person arrives into the inpatient unit, there's a whole series of relationships and information that they're bringing with them that we don't always recognize. We almost act like their life starts the day they're admitted, which is kind of like, we're really hoping, if you think about it, that that's not true. And we don't have a system in place yet to recognize that, and we should put that in place.
And if I could just quickly answer both those questions there. We have actually worked with Alan Glassroff on the design of the care coordinator model, and he's helped us think through some of those issues, and we can chat with you definitely on that. With regards to your comment, there's in parallel with the room design and the layout, there's in parallel the technology design of something called the patient engagement platform. By design, it's not called a patient education thing, because education already sounds arrogant, that we know and we will tell you. So the engagement platform is actually a virtual device through which you can connect with your care team. You can actually get the information that you want. You can download things from the Stanford website. You can talk to your care provider, not from 8 in the morning to 5 at night, but with a care coordinator 24/7. So all that design work is underway. That's where the weave-in will come from, say, the molecular tumor board. If something happens, if there's a big data warehouse that suddenly finds that there's some mutation of the gene, that's the mechanism that kind of brings those two avenues together. There's a lot more we could talk about. I'd be happy to chat with you about that. But Anne, we'd welcome your team to work with us. Absolutely. We'd welcome your team to work with us. Alan and I have chatted a little bit. We'll talk more.
We have one more. I think we have time for one more question. We're going to talk really fast.
Okay, so one of the problems we run into in inpatient experiences, especially in a teaching hospital, that the rounds start very, very early, and it's one person after another, after another, after another, after another. Have you come across anything to improve that experience?
Well, I would say we've come across a lot to improve that. None of it is terribly earth-shaking. We have an entire team of people here at the hospital that are looking at what we call the flow through an inpatient unit, both before, upstream, to Dr. Lindsay's point, as well as once you arrive in the unit, and then what goes on in the unit. And they've been at it for almost 7 months, taking apart what we do and building it back up again, so that it's not this disconnected series of processes and events. We're not going to reinvent that in what we're building. We're going to steal it with pride. And implement it in the units that comprise the cancer hospital as well. Yes, because there can be a constant, frankly, a churning revolving door, your resident of the month, right? And then all kinds of people, social workers, case managers, respiratory therapists, occupational therapists, pharmacists, clinical nutrition, spiritual care, you name it, they're in there. And we recognize that this kind of environment with that kind of traffic is not always conducive to healing.
In the interim, about 2 years ago, we created a nurse practitioner service. So when you're admitted to the hospital, you can be either admitted to the oncology resident service, the hematology resident service, or the nurse practitioner hematology oncology service. And that has made a big difference in terms of patient satisfaction, because although the traditional rounds with the attending is very similar, the nurse practitioners pre-round and they go back later in the day several times to deliver more personalized care.
Do one more?
Oh, one more question. So your comment about moving the design process out of a back room into the atrium was just made a lot of sense, because the atrium is out there and every single person is going through it. The doctors are going through it, the patients are going through it, the family, and many times, it's nice. There's some plants in there and all that kind of thing, but there's nothing happening, and this sort of transforms it from in a way a sterile place into something like a kindergarten classroom kind of thing, and I think that's kind of the way to do everything. I wish the atrium is like permanently something where all the design is happening and things are happening, and college campuses have a square that everyone goes through, and you've got that, use it.
We have noticed there are a lot more meetings in the atrium now.